And it's me, I said one and Puffer, welcoming you to Starfleet Universe on call. And tonight, we got me, we got Gary. I know Dave's around. Probably there's some folks hanging out in the chat room on Twitch, and yes, I am correct. We got Mad Cow, which if I call correctly, that's Russ. Ooh, that sucks. He's sick with COVID for the second time. Well, dude, our thoughts and prayers are with you. Lord knows that would suck for me, especially if I lost my taste, sense of taste, because that would be the worst in my mind. Okay, so I did mention him, so let's bring him on. Hey Gary, how you doing?
Not too bad. How are things?
Things are going good. Things are going good. I've been. This week has been a relatively chill week because it's just been me all my lonesome. Though of course I still had to work and all that kind of thing. But my wife went on a little vacation and took our daughter with her, so they had a nice. Yeah. Dave just reminded me that it's Dodgers 4, Braves 2, which is I want it to be the opposite, but hey, it is what it is. Hey Iggy. So, there was a particular topic that you wanted to.
So what I'm hearing
discuss.
is that.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing is that you'll have plenty of time to sit in peace and read the new rulebook for Federation and Empire Tactical Operations.
No. Here's the problem. I am a very, very slow reader. And so imagine reading the book aloud. That's how fast I read. And the funny part about that, there's a little story, which is back in, let me think. I think it was my junior high days. I actually attended a class, or therapy. Actually, it was considered therapy, in an effort to speed up my how fast I read. Basically, it was a forced reading where they had an actual projector which projected the words, and the idea was that they could crank up the speed a little bit at a time, and I could read faster and faster. No, didn't work. Didn't stick. So. But anyhow, so I definitely won't be reading it, but it's definitely interesting because of this is Federation. This is tactics operations. Basically, it's a tactics manual, correct? Gary?
No, tactical operations. No, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So, tactical operations is the latest expansion module for Federation and Empire. Now, the counter sheets Oscar and Tango were released earlier this year. You can get them on as spare parts on the Starfleet store.
Right.
But eventually, in the not too distant future, they'll be put together with the rulebook and basically sold as a proper module, if that makes sense. And so, tactical operations includes a ton of new ships that basically a bunch of ships that have been introduced in Starfleet battles that had never been gotten around to until now in Federation and Empire. And it also includes rules for new types of ships that didn't exist at the time in Federation and Empire, but now exist because they were made to exist in SFB. So like advanced technology maulers, for example. And it also includes a number of scenarios that many of them have basically been plucked from various issues of Captain's Log. And it even includes the first introduction to the wind cluster, because the winds are in the process of being introduced both here and also in the upcoming F&E Civil Wars module. So what happens is most of the auxiliary ships for the winds are in tactical operations, as well as a scenario that allows you to invade the wind cluster. Chapter comes out, that's going to include the fish ships, and it's going to include a scenario for the Win War of Return.
Right. Right. That'd be kind of cool. Yeah, I totally.
And now the only thing that's
I'm saying I was going to say that I totally. I don't usually follow the F&E product as much, of course, than SFB and FedCom, just because I play SFB and FedCom a lot more than F&E because I guess I've never got into F&E because it's more a strategic level versus tactics level, which is just not my thing, I guess. Anyway, what were you gonna say?
Well, a couple of things. One is ordinarily F&E module comes with a list, like how, for example, with an SFB module, there's usually like a starship chart, or what's the master ship chart, or there's a chart in the back of the book, the rule book, that basically lists all the various ships that are new to the game in the book,
right,
and also like what their year in service date and all that kind of stuff, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But in this one, it does not include the SIT, the ship information table, for the ships that are in TacOps, because what's happening instead is that ADB are basically, they have a series of master SITs that for the various empires that are on the BBS. And so what will happen is that in the not too distant future, they'll all be updated to incorporate the ships from tactical operations. So
okay.
You'll basically have like a single PDF that will be kind of like a master reference chart for every Federation ship or every Klingon ship or every ISC ship and so forth. And it'll tell you like which module it's in and, what's the year of service date and all that kind of stuff, what it is, the command rating and so on. So you'll basically should keep an eye out for that. Now, there is a provisional TacOps SIT that was posted during the development process. So I don't know if that's going to get tweaked a bit and so forth, like in the coming days or weeks or whatever. But so that's one thing that's a little bit different, because going forward, all of the F&E modules are going to be like that. So they're no longer going to include the SIT data. That's going to be basically made available separately on the ADB website.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool.
And also,
wait a minute. But what about in the meantime?
Well, I think the sorry.
Yeah, because my understanding is what you're saying is that they're at a later point in time they're going to update the SITs on the website to include everything that's in TacOps. But at the moment there's no TacOps chart in the actual rules at the moment, correct? A SIT that's part of the TacOps.
You can use the pre-final one that they have posted on the PDFs. It's mostly up to date. I don't know how much data needs to be put into it, but I guess it's enough to get you by. So.
Okay. So in other words, you might just have to. If you don't want to look at this, basically a pre-release set, you can just look at the counters. I'm assuming the counters have all the information that's necessary, and just the set is.
Somewhat.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Like the SIT includes things like the
year in service,
or conversion costs, and so forth.
Yeah. Forgot about that part.
And also which ships you can convert from, because
right.
Like for example with X ships, you can't convert. You can convert them from the equivalent peacetime construction hull, but you can't convert them from a wartime construction hull unless you build it to peacetime standards, which you wouldn't ordinarily do unless you're in the process of building the X ship in the first place. So, like for example, if you have, for example, one of the standard technology ships that's being included is the Federation Heavy Command Cruiser. So that's on the camper sheet. So you could, I guess, once the master SIT is updated, you'd be able to do what Starfleet did historically with the prototype CX, is basically take a CB and pay the X conversion cost, whatever to do it.
Right.
But on the other hand, if you have a Federation NCA, then you cannot convert that into a Federation NAX. You'd have to basically build an NAX from scratch.
Right. Right.
Which is also a unit that I'm fairly sure it's in here as well. So I'm just checking because, yes, that's right. The NAX is included on the counter sheet because in the rulebook, it basically breaks down the various categories of ships that are newly included. So basically, what also includes with is because originally when heavy war destroyers were included in Fed and Empire, they had like a generic counter, and there's a little kind of a blank square in the corner, so you could mark down which mission the variant has been assigned.
Yeah.
So, but now what they've done is the TacOps comes with specific counters for a variety of different missions, like for the HDWs. And there's basically what's also happening is that, because I think we might have mentioned this in podcasts past, but there is a project going on called Warbook, which is about basically taking some of the older modules and bringing them up to 2021 standards.
Right.
And when the 2021 update to the Advanced Operations Rulebook is done, that is going to incorporate the most recent revisions to, specifically for the Federation, because the Feds are the most complicated because other empires in the Alpha Octant, they can basically just build a fast patrol ship tender version of the HDW. So it'll basically include room for 6 PFs, mech links, and then also 2 special sensors. But because the Feds
don't have
PFs,
Yeah.
standards, in the standard timeline, they don't build PFs. So instead, they've got like 3 different sets of heavy fighters, like the A-20, the F-111, and the F-101. So Fed Empire basically has about 4 different designations that only the Federation use, specifically for different combinations of heavy fighters that SSB allows their heavy war destroyers to use.
Right. Fed had to go a different way. Annoying. At the same time, at the same time, it's kind of nice, that they came up with a different way because Lord knows, I'm sure you've heard it before, which is the whole issue with cookie cutter. There was a point in time where it seemed like A to B was just you create like the heavy war destroyer, and then everyone had to have a heavy war destroyer, and if someone had whatever, a new heavy cruiser, everyone had to have a new heavy cruiser, and to stamp them out, bump, 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 bump. Just happens they have their special, they have their whatever equipment and so forth, and you never have this idea of different philosophies when it comes to what ships would be built by different empires, So that was always the issue.
Well, you won't have to worry about that with the Frady because Tactical Operations also includes a counter for the Powerista.
Cool. Yeah, so definitely I announced that for those of you who aren't listening to the podcast and only listen to like the video on YouTube, they as Gary does point out, which is the Federation Empire of Tactical Operations just got released this week. It's available on the various e-tailers, the Warehouse 23, the Drive-Thru RPG, the War Game Vault, and of course also it's available through ADV's online store and of course your local game store. And as I mentioned there, and I'm going to repeat it real quick, which is please, 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 if possible, get any physical product through your local game store. We want to support them in any way, shape, or form that we can. We want them to be around. We want the community that can gather around those game stores. So just a reminder. So onward.
Well, I should note that I think there's still a couple days worth to post some after action reports on the BBS. So if there's any errata items that you see on there that you're not 100% sure about, then
Yes.
that might just give them a little bit of time over the next day or two to update the version that's going to go in the print version. So,
Right. So,
don't be shy if
well,
you see something on there.
well, at the same time, the great thing about the way A2B does the print version is that it's printed on demand. Now, obviously, you have the issue, which I'm sure is why they don't do this. In theory, they could correct it, a little bit at a time. But then you have the whole issue with versioning issue. It's like a software product at that point, where you need to know what actually, what errata that needs to be put out there, so that people who have a certain version of the hard copy knows what they need to errata it. So I'm sure that they don't actually fix the errata, on the hard copy, immediately. They might wait for a while, even though they have the errata. So, yeah, but as Gary pointed out, if you're getting the product, the e-product, then I understood. Iggy understood. Iggy has mentioned that no local game store carries A2B products. Actually, Iggy, have you actually checked with the owner if they can special order it from their distributor? I understand that sometimes that's they won't, because they won't buy a few copies of the game just in case someone actually might buy it. But they might be able to get it through that. Not even Complete Strategist? Wow. It's been a while since I bought anything from Complete Strategist, because the last Complete Strategist I visited is in King of Prussia. I'm not even sure if they still exist in King of Prussia. I'd have to take a look-see. But, anywho, so you wanted to talk about the Shapeways miniatures, the ones from...
That's right. Well, actually, just one final thing on the Fed and Empire thing as well is that one of the scenarios, as I say, the scenario for the wind cluster is pretty interesting, but not necessarily just for the wind themselves, and also there's a scenario that basically shows what would have happened had the Gorns and Federation gone to war during the Middle Years. But those two scenarios, I find them interesting for a more long-range reason, because the Gorn scenario includes stand-ins, because there aren't any official counters, I should say, for many of the Middle Years Gorn ships, like the Gorn Heavy Cruiser or the pre-refit version of the CL or CC, or even the Gorn Early Dreadnought. And in this one, now, basically what happened, this similar thing happened years ago with the Four Powers War, because when the first version of Fire Ops was done, it basically included a list of stand-in units to represent things like the Klingon C6 or the Lyran Royal Tiger Early Dreadnought. Right. But then when the 2016 version was done, they were able to actually expand the number of counters on the reprinted counter sheet. And the new counter sheet does, in fact, have ships of the Four Powers War. So they were able to basically formally include those ships for the first time.
Okay, so they actually have the actual middle year ships, and instead of saying, okay, this is approximately what it was. That's cool.
Yes. Now with this time around, it's still only stand-ins, because there wasn't any room to put the unrefitted Gorn ships onto the TacOps counter sheets.
Right.
But now that the semi-official stand-ins, like the principle has basically been put into rules, what I would like to see is in the future, like say for example, because we might have mentioned in the past that there's been previews for the Lost Empire, Parabians, and Carnivons for Federal Empire in issues of Captain's Log, and so the Parabians basically include a range of middle-year ships, and they have the provisional SIT for the Parabians, the preview Parabians, as a lot of P's in a row. They include those ships. So in principle, you could basically do up a middle-years campaign between the Parabians and the Gorns.
Mm-hmm.
and you could sub in the equivalent Goran cruisers so that they'd be able to fight the Praevians at the appropriate power level. And in the long term, if a future F&E product after this one is able to find room for those Goran middle year ships, then it means that it would be easier for players to actually fight those campaigns when Praevian counters ever get done. So that you'd be able to basically make use of that map sheet P, the one that basically shows the what if the Praevians still had an empire, like in the Alpha Octant, and they would have been basically bordered up against both the ISC and the Gorns. So that, I think, is an interesting future possibility that TacOps opens up. And the second one that I think is interesting is that on the Carnarvon side of Module C6, the Lost Empires material, there's two different versions of sorry, Irving?
Yeah. So remember, did they add the Carnarvons into TacOps?
Well, no. What I mean is that because there's a preview for the Carnarvons in, I want to say, Captain's Log 51, and it uses basically one of the two alternate timeline options for the Carnarvons. So there's one option where the Carnarvons survive in their little corner of the Alpha Octant, and they basically they border the wind cluster. So in principle, a future update, like in Captain's Log or whatever, could include a variant of the new wind cluster scenario, allowing the Carnarvons to attack the wind cluster. So that could be an option. But also, the Carnarvons in Module C6 have an alternate timeline where they basically flee into the wind cluster and they become the wind faction, but they still use Carnarvon ships. And then later in the timeline, they burst out of the wind cluster and establish a brand new empire out of Klingon, Lyran, and Kzinti space. So now that we have at least the basics of what the wind cluster looks like in Federation and Empire terms, in theory, that could be used. You could pivot towards one day figuring out how to do those cluster Carnarvons as a playable empire, like if and when the time comes to revisit the Carnarvons in Fed and Empire terms.
Right. Oh, that'd be cool. I like that idea. The whole idea of the Carnarvons taking over the wind, taking over the cluster. Yeah. And basically, a way of protecting themselves and hiding out, you know, and then at some point reemerge.
Do you have? I think a while back, you might have gotten. There's like a PDF. There's like a free preview for the Module C6 rulebook. Do you still have that on your computer?
Let me take a look. See. Let's see if I can. Oh yeah, there's the pre. That's weird. Yeah, I got the preview and okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. You mean the one that shows the F&E map?
Well, you can show both maps because if you open up that PDF, there's one page that shows the Praevian map, and then there's a later page that shows both Carnarvon maps.
Right. Oh, that's an interesting one. Let me just so people can see the map that we're talking about here. Okay, it's got me queried there. So I'm looking at. I'm laughing because it's the title of the page is Historical Maps. It's like, okay. Sorry, people. I got distracted by my cat, who's I'm concerned is going to do something stupid. Saka. No one wants to play with my necklace. Okay, anyway, the bottom shows the Empire of the Carnarvon cluster in the top. has the Carnarvon Empire from Y120 to Y168. So, bum, bum, bum. Okay, is that considered part of the same timeline?
They're two separate timelines.
Okay, two separate.
So
Okay,
the one on the top is basically had the Carnarvon survived as a traditional empire.
okay,
And you can actually see on the top map, there are planets that don't exist anymore because they had Carnarvons living on them. And in the historical timeline, they were wiped out. So if you look at the bottom map, they're not there anymore either. So the main bulk of Carnarvons are in the wind cluster instead.
Oh, okay. Sorry, distracted by my cat again. Yeah, okay, yeah, I see. And then and they don't even exist in the bottom, where the Carnarvon were in the wind cluster. That's interesting. Okay. Yep. Okay. Just checking out the. That's.
And as I say, a few pages up, you can see the Parabian map sheet P, and that would give you a sense of how you'd be able to work out like a middle years campaign that had either Gorns versus Parabians or ISC versus Parabians.
Okay. That's weird. I'm not sure if this is a typo or not. But it says Parabian Farnest? Farnest?
Oh, yeah, because that would have been their off-map zone had they survived as an empire.
Oh, okay. Far Nest.
There's these. Yeah, there's.
Okay, it's the weird. It was just weird, the spelling. It's like it didn't really click until if it was like two separate words, yeah, I can understand, but one word. It's like Farn Est. It's like, what the heck is that? What's Farn Nest? No, it's Far Nest.
Yeah. So for the Carnarvons in CL51, there's an F&E style map for them. The Carnarvon Empire version, I should say, not the cluster one.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Carnarvon Empire version, I think their off map is called the Carnarvon Remote Ranges or something like that.
Mm. They came like thunder. Sorry, I'm looking.
But it is interesting how, on the one hand, if you look at the Parabian map, suddenly it makes that corner of the Alpha Octans much more dynamic, where it wasn't before. But
right.
If you look at the Carnarvon ones, it's almost trickier because, like, the Carnarvons being there as an on-map empire makes the balance very difficult for the general war.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, how are you going to basically swing that? I actually think it'd be interesting if you had a scenario where the Klingons and Carnarvons teamed up against the Kzintis and Lyrans. But the Kzintis and Lyrans weren't necessarily allied per se. They were more like they happened to be fighting the same enemy at the same time, but they still hated each other.
Right.
So
that would be interesting, because of course, in the traditional timeline, the Lyrans are an ally to the Klingons, and the Klingons actually sell them like Klingon tug pods, and I think the Lyran get the UIM modules from the Klingons, correct?
I think they get both that and their facts from the Klingons.
Mm-hmm. Which would be interesting, because the question is, would the Lyrans start using some of the Carnarvon weapon technology if they were allies with the Carnarvons instead of the Klingons?
Well, the Lyrans and Carnarvons would never ally because all the various cat and dog people, can't stand each other. But it would be interesting if the Lyrans were forced to ally with the Hydrons instead, because there is a scenario in Captain's Log which kind of flips the alliances around, where it was the Kzintis rather than the Lyrans who allied with the Klingons. So the Lyrans were basically forced to ally with the Hydrians instead.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Wow. Whoa. The thing is, what I'm thinking about is in the case of the Carnivons basically coming out of the cluster, and then they expand and actually have their own empire. And as you pointed out, it's a difficult thing for them to do. And I even think about it more. I'm going, I can't, unless the Carnivons were extremely strong, or the Klingons were hard pressed on other lines, combat lines. I forget the term at the moment. Against the Hydrians and the Zinni. I can't imagine the Carnivons actually surviving overall.
Well, in the Carnivon timeline, the Carnivons kick things off in Y178. So at that point, the Kzintis still haven't regained most of their territory, but the Klingons are basically fully engaged against the Federation. So,
right,
like the tide has already begun to turn against them, like in that sense. So, and the Lyrans, they're basically still trying to keep tabs on things in occupied Hydrian space, and also help out now and then on the Federation front. So the Carnivons basically, they become kind of de facto alliance members, but it basically means that the Kzintis never come back. So like on this map, I think if I recall correctly, the C6 version of events basically has it that any Kzintis who are still alive pretty much been absorbed by the Federation. So you're basically in a de facto replacing the Kzintis with the Carnivons as a quote-unquote alliance power. That's why the wind cluster has the 5-pointed star, because in Fed Empire terms, if it's a 5-pointed star, it's an alliance capital. If it's a 6-pointed star, it's a neutral capital, like the ISC capital. Or if it's an 8-pointed star, it is a coalition capital, like the Klingon or Lyran homeworld.
Yeah, which is okay. It's just that we see a larger area. Okay. That makes sense now. Okay. I was wondering, it's like, wait a minute, why are we seeing the Lyran capitals on the bottom but not the top? And then I realized that basically it's a shift in the map, that is. We're seeing more of the lower part of the map. Actually seeing a larger map overall. So you actually can see where the Lyran capital is. While on the top map, where the Carnivon don't take over the wind cluster. The Lyran, you don't see the Lyran capital just because it's a smaller map.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so basically that's right. The map is on the bottom half of that page is 2 hexes deeper.
True. Exactly. That's but yeah, as I said, I think that alternate timeline where the Carnivon take over the wind cluster, and basically, my assumption is that that basically they beat. Well, that's interesting. In that alternate timeline, when I'm assuming that the Zinni, what's it called?
The hegemony.
Yeah, but there's a reason. The wind cluster was originally settled by a Zinni, not anarchist.
The usurper.
Usurper, thank you. I'm assuming that basically what happens in that case when it comes to usurper is that the usurper is killed when he enters the wing cluster because the Carnivon are already there.
About about a decade in that alternate timeline, because historically the Carnivons were divided up into about 12 to 14 hordes, but the hordes, they could never really ally like maybe more than 2 or 3 of them at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So in the first timeline, the Carnivon Empire timeline, they are united and they become like a standard empire. But in the Carnivon cluster timeline, the 2 hordes that are closest to the wing cluster decide to flee into the. They take a bunch of their ships and logistics trains and fly, basically quote unquote kill themselves by flying into the radiation shell. And historically, apparently, something like that actually happened. Like when the usurper showed up historically, he actually found the wreckage of a couple of Carnivon ships, but everyone was dead. But in this timeline, they made it through. So they were there basically about 15 or 20 years before, or 10 years or so before the usurper showed up. So when he showed up, and then when the Orions showed up, they pretty much got captured, and then their technology was kind of reverse engineered to kind of give the Carnivons access, an understanding of what modern technology should look like. Mm-hmm. So basically the Carnivons had a much larger starting point in terms of population and technology, a number of ships as well. So by the time they were going to burst out, they actually had a pretty substantial fleet that they could use to, claim a new empire, like on the open map.
Right. Yeah. I'm just thinking about the Carnivons' their stupidity in staying separate. It's like, instead of joining together to become a single great horde, and be something more along the lines of the Lyran Empire, where you have the counts and so forth, but they consider themselves as a single empire. Even though there's different duchies, different counties, basically. Which is definitely a better way of going. So there never was an alpha, alpha dog, king.
Well, I suppose, like in the historical timeline, there's still hopefully the possibility that there might be some exiled Carnivons in the Sargasso storm zone.
Right, and that's what I'm kind of hoping for, even if they're just a small horde, because the Paravians in the Omega, they're not really that large, if I recall correctly. Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, that's how they start off, but then after the Andromedan and Sulfur invasions are over, they actually become a major threat.
Okay. So, yeah, but in the Sargassian, which is, to say the very least, an interesting part of the galaxy, with those the seasonal storms, which separate everyone out, into their own little pockets of, and of course the Zerkalians. Which the question, I think that the more importante question in that regard is, will ADB ever get around to doing it?
Well, I suppose, if things proceed with Module X2, then I guess the odds would be more favorable for the Zerkalians. But when it comes to the Sargasso, I don't know. I mean, like, having the Carnivons is nice, but you'd probably need a few other empires, like brand new ones, to be there too, like just to kind of like, build around and stuff. But although I suppose like you wouldn't necessarily have to do them all at once. I mean, you could probably just maybe place ones, that maybe 3 of them that are relatively close to where the Carnivons will be,
right,
and start with them. and then basically introduce Sargasso from the Carnarvon perspective. And then if it's a success, build it out. And if it's not, then never mind.
Right. And but the only question about the Zircalians is, do we have to have the second generation ships for the alpha octant before they can actually introduce the Zircalians?
Well, you'd have to ask ADB that, but supposedly there have been long-range Zircalian incursions into the alpha octant for decades, but it's not until Y210 before the invasion happens. So in theory, they could maybe do like a prototype thing where you just get a few sample ships and then try them out. But I suspect that a formal module would have to wait until Module X.
Right. Understood.
If you like, say, for example, if they gave you like an Andromedan intruder and a Cobra, a couple of Cobras rather, and you basically play tested them
right.
as like a wandering monster. But then it's only later that they realize, oh, by the way, these guys are, here's their full fleet, you know.
Understood. I think that'd be great if they could have a playtest module for the Zircalians, because I know I'd be interested in it. Of course, with ADB, I know what I would like to do, but the question, would ADB actually be interested at all? Because I know that Ken Burnside was quite interested, and that was when they were working on LMC. You know, Ken Burnside contacted me, and we actually worked on adding the rules and the weapons and so forth onto the online client. The reason being is that you could then play test the LMC ships, you know, a collection of LMC ships actually in the client, and people could actually test it over the internet, you know. So you wouldn't require doing everything local, which is in this day and age when it comes to SFB, it's getting tight. It's getting hard.
Although when it comes to playtest stuff, I do wonder, have you talked to ADB about, because there's a number of playtest rules for Fed Commander for things like X-ships and gunboats and stuff. Would it be worth asking them if they'd allow any of the online players to help playtest those rules?
I can neither confirm nor deny that there's support in the product for said ships.
Okay.
Well, actually, I can say that there's support for the ships already in there. ADB already contacted me about them. That I can say, and I have some of the gunboats. We just can't release them, not until ADB allows us to release them. So, yeah.
So speaking of Ken Burnside's work, Secret Universe Spies, I mentioned before the recording started that another one of his empires has been added to the Shipway storefront. So,
right.
I thought it'd be a good chance to take a look at them.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Actually, don't mind me. I'm going to go and see if I can. Shapeways project. That's always the way I get there, is I actually go to the discussion board because they have a link right there. I have this weird thing. Yeah, Dave. The Braves are losing 6-2 to the Dodgers. I'm not happy. I try to keep the number of actual links to websites down to a minimum, if possible. Okay, and I'll sort by newest. Okay, right, and which is those are weird. Sorry, I should share what I'm seeing with the rest of the world. And that is the Badovai destroyers and frigates, and of course the light cruiser, and then the Carnivons. Ooh. Which that's Carnivons.
Yeah, you can actually go. You can go.
Yes.
If you go over to the side, you can actually see there's a separate empire by empire listing.
Yes.
So you should see one specifically for the Badovai, and then also, for comparison's sake, there should be one from a few months ago for the Inine as well.
Mm-hmm. There it is, Inine. Right. This is the old. Yes. Wow. Oh, they're actually. Okay, there are two of them. Okay. From out there, I thought that was a really weird ship. Looking at the Neen Corvettes. And from over there, I thought that the two Corvettes that are right now, they're basically together, they're linked together, were actually one ship. And no, they're two ships that you have to separate. Which is weird, but hey, that is fine. Okay, let me show the ones that actually just got released. The Baduvai. Which, to me, the weird part about these ships is they kind of look like the upper portion look like basically fighters. You know?
Yeah, if you look at the cruisers, they look kind of like space shuttles.
Yep. Looks like a modern
so actually,
shuttle.
If you want to drop in one, yeah. So if you want to have a closer look, I'd probably suggest on one page bring up the Inine heavy cruiser, and maybe on another page bring up the Badovai strike cruiser.
Okay. Okay, there's the strike. So let's bring a new tab for that one versus the heavy cruiser. And what I can do is I can do this. So that we could, yeah. Cool. I know people on the podcast, it's really, really exciting. But yeah, the strike cruiser looks basically like a fighter, while the heavy cruiser looks more like a modern space shuttle. And
I remember years ago, someone on the BBS referred to the Inine as Fat Lyrans.
That wouldn't surprise me, because definitely then overall, yeah. I've seen the SSD for the Inine, and now I even see the ships themselves, which are pretty bulky and not. Overall, I don't like the design of the ships, but you know, I'm not gonna like all ships, you know. It's like they put.
You know the
Yeah, for the Nina, it just looked like they put a hex thing on the top and just attached some pods on the bottom. You know.
Well, the the bit on the top is basically the carapace, but then the warp engines and the bridge and stuff are in the booms underneath. And I think there's rules where you can like detach the port boom, almost like the way you can like separate the boom on a Klingon ship or whatever.
Oh, okay.
So, for the Badavai, it's a bit different because their ships are kind of, I guess they can drop their warp missiles as normal, but the actual ship is just kind of like, it doesn't have its own like separable section.
Right. So you don't have like a boom slash. Oh, geez, what do the Klingons call it? There's the boom section, and then there is the. I forget the
saucer on Federation ships.
No, I'm thinking about the Klingons. Because the whole section.
Oh, the Neotholians.
What's that?
The Neotholians with their command modules?
No, I'm thinking about the Klingons, because the Klingons, you have the boom section, and then you have the back section, I forget what that's called.
Oh, the secondary hull?
Secondary hull. So, yeah. Well, I guess that's one of the good things about the Anine then.
And you can also see on the Anine ship is that the neutron beam weapons have been mounted facing to the sides, because on the SSDs they have split firing arcs.
I'm looking at the heavy cruiser versus the light cruiser. And the heavy cruiser, you got the big section, and then you have these two pods, and that's it. Versus
they're different design generations, because so the Anine, the ones that you see there, the smaller ships like the destroyer and light cruiser and the corvette, they're actually earlier ships that the Anine found that when they had to develop modern technology, that they could not upgrade the warp engines on their earlier ships. So they were more like what the Federation would call a National Guard ship. So even the Anine light cruiser still can't go faster than Speed 24.
Oh, okay.
So the Anine heavy cruiser is a more modern design, built from the outset to be able to fight at Speed 31. So the other modern Anine ships would look closer to the heavy cruiser than the light cruiser. So in a sense, the miniatures are good in terms of presenting that difference in design generation.
Mm-hmm. Actually, let me look at the strike cruiser for a moment for the Badavai. I'll look at the 3D model. That's interesting, because that's one of those things that you can easily. Those are the kind of ships, the Badavai. I think those are ships that could easily be borrowed from another science fiction based combat system. You know, I think that they could easily do that with little effort. You know. Which I'm sure A to B would be fine with. Hey, if you want to buy ships that I can make a profit off of, buy them for whatever game you want to buy them for, you know.
Well, if you're using them in the SFU, you can actually see that underneath the little triangle warp engines, they've got the dots to represent the charged particle accelerators, and if you underneath the prow, they've got the master driver launchers there.
Oh, okay. I see it. Right now I'm looking at the proof frigate, which is interesting. Because
with
yeah, all I was going to say was that it looks like it's almost like a cargo pod, which could easily be dropped from the ship. That's what it looks like. Whether I understand that most probably it can't, but that's what it looks like.
Well, I guess the nacelle, they're sets because, but you know how, like Federation ships, they have certain sizes of nacelles that are common to a number of different types of ships. So, for example, the frigate has 2 6-box engines, and then the War Destroyer and Battle Frigate have 3, and then Heavy War Destroyer has 4.
Mm-hmm.
And the old Saladin class destroyer uses the same engines as the Dreadnought and the Heavy Cruiser. So similarly with the Battle Eye, there's certain basically building blocks that they use from certain engine sizes. So the Strike Cruiser, the central warp engine is the same as the 2 warp engines on the Heavy Cruiser. But then the port and starboard engines on the Strike Cruiser are the same ones that you would see on like the War Cruiser and War Destroyer, like if/when those appear.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Gotta stop that. I was starting to read the text describing the Battle Eye. It's like, no, this is not good. This is not good, good material. I'm gonna look at something.
How's that?
What's that?
What is it about them that you don't like?
No, it's nothing I don't like. It's just that having me sitting here, quiet as a mouse, staring at the screen, doesn't make actually engaging material that people actually want to listen to.
Oh, okay.
You know, and as I said, I am a slow reader.
Although it is good that because the various species in the LMC, there's like a decent variety, and they all have something different. Like there's none of them that are just they look like humans. So like
right.
You've got like the Bad Boy, kind of like 4-legged creatures with no heads, and they've got these kind of weird like brain things on their backs, and then you've got the Inine are kind of like space lemurs, and then you've got the Magazine, they're kind of, well, I guess there's insectoid species in other parts of the universe as well, but so it's like they all, there's something a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I guess if you really want humans to show up there so badly enough, you could just wait until Operation Unity.
Yeah, well, I agree. That's always been, of course, one of the issues that people have had with like Star Trek and so forth, which is every single empire, let's go back. Let's use a proper term. We're actually talking about race. It seemed like every race was humanoid. The only ones that were not humanoid really are the Tholians. But the rest are humanoid. Well, why? Why are they all humanoids? In the case of Star Trek, you can actually imagine the reason why, at least the original Star Trek empire, races were humanoids, because that's all you could do. You were limited by the costumes and so forth of the people that were playing the parts. They had to be humanoid. But you can even Star Wars. If you look at Star Wars, all of the known races are humanoid. At least from I remember from the different movies and TV series that I've watched. Lord knows I've watched quite a few of those, because my dear sweet son, he loves his Star Wars. So I've watched quite a few of them with her. Chris just mentioned the species 8472 on Voyager wasn't humanoid, which I think is a good thing. A good way of separating it out from the original series. So, anyhow,
actually, because they kind of lampshade that in the SFU as well, because like if you read things like Prime Directive Federation and so forth, it talks about how there's so many planets where ancient humans or Andorians or whatever were planted there 100,000 years ago, and that's just why they look they look humanoid or whatever. And even in other parts of the universe, I mean, there's in the eastern part of the Alpha Octans in particular, most of the planets that the Gorns or Romulans would settle, if they even had any previous inhabitants, they were kind of conveniently killed off in the past, so in ancient past. So there's not that much of a variety there.
Right.
So it's not until you start going into places like Omega or the LMC or whatever, and that's when you really start seeing a broader variety of creatures and stuff. But
right. And
I mean, I suppose even in franchise terms, Paramount probably find it easier to include non-humanoid creatures in, say, Lower Decks or the upcoming Prodigy show than they could in live-action stuff like Discovery or Picard or Strange New Worlds. Although, special effects have moved on a long way, so maybe Strange New Worlds will have a bevy of non-quadruped, non-four-limbed beings that they'll encounter, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chris was just mentioning that there's a TNG episode called The Chase that offers an explanation of why there are so many humanoid races in the galaxy. And of course, in the SFU universe, its history, they have the whole thing of, the Klingons, the old kings, and the case of the Gorns. There are multiple Gorns, kinds of Gorns, blue, green, I think yellow. I forget the different colors. But they were all on different planets, and of course there's the Lizard Kings. The whole idea is that there was these
the ancestors of the Praevians,
these ancient races that were pre-existed, and then from that came these other races. Spirit Kings. I forget what the Spirit Kings were. But anyhow, I think with that we'll wrap it up for this evening. I don't want to run too late. So, Gary, it's been wonderful having you around because it's been a while.
Thank you so much.
And so you have
just one final question before we go is, are you going to watch Prodigy next week or not?
Probably not. No. Is that on Paramount Plus or it'd be Paramount Plus? Yeah, that's where it would be.
In the US, yes. In Canada, it'll be on Crave and CTV Sci-Fi Channel. Mm-hmm. So, just actually, what's interesting is that Canada is one of the few countries in the world where all of the current franchise series are actually broadcast on television because the license holder, Bell, basically they put it all on television on CTV Sci-Fi Channel, and then they have their own streaming service called Crave, which streams them as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they do actually make Star Trek Discovery and the one with Christopher Pike, Strange New Worlds. That one is going to be on those same channels as well.
Understood.
Just hope that the Strange New Worlds version of the Enterprise doesn't have that roller coaster turbo lift thing.
Yeah, I have not been really that interested in. I haven't even gotten through the first season for the Star Trek series. Star Trek. I forget what it's called. But it's been on Paramount Plus for forever, and I have yet to get through the first season. I know there's 3 Discovery. Thank you, Chris. Star Trek Discovery. I got through the first 3 episodes, and that's where I left it. Haven't gone through the first full season, and my understanding is that I think the second season isn't so hot. The third was better, and now they have the 4th season, which is coming out too.
Well, I will say that for the second season is that the people who play like Christopher Pike. Well, I guess I'm spoiling it for you now, but basically, Anson Mount. You might have seen him in. He was in another show called The Inhumans for Marvel. But yeah, he basically plays Christopher Pike, and he's really good as Pike, actually. So him, and then Ethan Peck, who plays young Spock, and then Rebecca Romaine, she plays number one. Like, you remember Majel Barrett's character from The Cage?
Right.
They basically were so popular that they're actually getting a brand new spin-off, and season 1 of that just filmed. And it's actually called Strange New Worlds. It's set on the Enterprise, like 1701, no AB story. And it's going to be set like with Pike as in command. And that's going to be coming up in the not-too-distant future as well.
Huh. Interesting. What they do to the Star Trek franchise, it's just nuts. Well, that's what Disney is currently doing with the Star Wars franchise, doing all these different shows, based on the Star Wars franchise. Which the Mandalorian, I've not watched any episodes of that at all. When it comes to Disney Plus, the only reason I still have it at all is just because of my kids like to watch it, especially my son. My son and my daughter they love watching the same shows again and again and again and again. Big surprise.
Well, it's actually funny because in Canada and in some other countries, because we don't have Hulu outside of the US, so instead they added a subsection to Disney Plus called Star that includes a number of Hulu projects. And it actually also includes seasons 1 and 2 of The Orville. So I'm hoping that when season 3 of The Orville comes on next March, that it'll be on Disney Plus here in Canada. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yes. Oh, geez. I've heard about the Orville. I have not watched any of those episodes either. There's only so many hours in the day I have, and only so many hours in the night I have for watching TV. Because I got other things to get done. So, anyhow, let me get going. Gary, it's been wonderful, and you have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, bye. So, interesting discussion about the F&E and, of course, the latest Shapeways miniatures and some of the Badavai, sorry. Yeah, I know I'm mutilating the pronunciation of the Empire, but it is what it is. Anyhow, with that, I am Paul Franz, and I bid you a good night.